So we're at chapter 3. We're still at the first Mishnah. And today we're not just going to listen to the way the Mishnah sounds with the chanting that we heard last time that we met, but
Which
let's
was
try to.
beautiful, by the way.
Yeah, it's a very moving rendition. It's a, I find it very inspiring. So now we're actually going to look at it, right? And we're going to try to make some sense of it for ourselves. So how about one more time? Let's just have a quick run through of the text, and then we can start discussing it. Who's going to read it for us?
I can read it.
All right. No, Geraldine beat you to it by,
Okay,
by
that's
a
fine.
nanosecond. By a nanosecond.
I do it all the time. Let Sarita read it.
All right, Sarita, go ahead.
That's fine. Believe me, I read Torah study all the time.
All
Okay. Right. That means I have to. Okay. Akavia, the son of Mahalalel, said, "Reflect upon three things, and thou wilt not come within the power of sin. Know whence thou camest, whither thou art going, and before whom thou wilt in future have to give account and reckoning. Whence thou camest from a fetid drop, whither thou art going to a place of dust, worms, and maggots, and before whom thou wilt in future have to give account and reckoning, before the supreme King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be he."
Right. Okay, good. Yesher koach. So we're supposed to contemplate, consider, look deeply into histakel. The word histakel means to look, but it also is related to the word seichel, which means to, take to heart, think about this, look into it. The way we say the word looking in English also. Let me look into that. Let me examine it. Let me investigate. So he says, contemplate, look at these three things. If we think about it literally as looking, how can that mean that idea of looking at something? I mean, are we talking about visible, tangible items? I mean, in the simplest level,
No.
of course not.
Oh, it's looking internally.
So looking internally, what does that mean?
What?
Yeah, Josie. You have to unmute.
Rabbi Shapiro uses the word reflect.
Think
But
about
that's
it.
what this one did too. Yeah.
Right. Think about it. Consider it. Mull
Yeah.
over it. Right.
Which I always think of as, deepen your attention.
Right.
When you reflect.
So, but what I'm, and I think that's all fine, legitimate. It's there, but I would suggest that human beings sometimes they can think through imagery. They think through picturing things. And we're not all that great at it. Our tradition has sort of become aniconic, without pictures. But if you think about churches and other religious shrines and temples and so on, that are like festooned with imagery, with pictures, and with all kinds of depictions of abstract ideas, and yet they're then put into identifiable kinds of colors and shapes, and they're very humanized, right? You could imagine, I could imagine, the artist, depicting a rotting corpse, with all the ugly, icky stuff creeping all over. What's Halloween about? I actually can't stand that holiday, but clearly I'm in some kind of minority.
If you think about it as the Day of the Dead, which is what it was for Celtic, originally,
Right.
It's,
Right.
It's a day to honor your ancestors, to, etc.
Is so
Yeah, but
clear
that's
from the
not
way
what,
that, which is so clear from the way that people, decorate their their front lawns and so on, right? It's obviously that's what they're thinking. So, it certainly has captured, a tremendous degree of people's feelings and imagination. I forget about the commercialization of it. But this whole business of fascination with death and of somehow, death is scary as anything. How do you come to grips with it? How do you come to terms with it? And Halloween is very much of an in-your-face, literally, kind of, turning around stuff that would be horrific and terrorizing, and turning it into something entertaining. And I'm not, I'm not scared of dancing skeletons or decomposing flesh and stuff like that. So, there is this kind of, we have a need to come to grips with this stuff, and it has been done very often with visualization. I'm not going to have such an easy time with the fetid, putrid drop that we come from about visualizing that. That's almost more scary than the death image. But I think that part of what Akavia ben Mahalalel could be saying for some people is, would that help you? Would imagining those kinds of images help you get serious about this stuff? Help you put your life in perspective, right? Because there's a function that he is saying. Why should you look at those three things? The answer is because otherwise you will fall into the hands of sin, right? So a fate worse than death. So, he's saying, what are the strategies that you could, employ so as not to fall into the grip of sin? Josie, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, you don't think he's trying to maybe not frighten, but startle us?
Sure. No, I agree. I'm just saying, what are the means that he's trying to do it? The words are one thing, and thinking about it is one thing. And for some people, maybe, looking up at the Last Judgment scene in a in a cathedral was meant to do that. If you walked in, sometimes just walking into the entrance of a church, there'd be demons, portrayed on the capitals of the pillars, the columns holding up the church and the doorway of the church. They were trying to scare the bejeebies out of you, right?
Well, does Judaism then say that words are more important than pictures?
So over time, for various reasons, some have to do with ideas, and some have to do with just history. We are, we don't have a Notre Dame. We don't have a Strasbourg Cathedral. We don't, and so we don't have all of those kinds of magnificent, amazing stained glass windows and all that kind of stuff. We don't have that. Now, one of the reasons we don't have that is, as you just said, because we ended up really thinking much more about God created the world with words, with speech, and we became people of the book, quote unquote. We delved into and created magnificently a whole, civilization of thinking and arguing and interpreting and questioning and then writing some more. So those are our cathedrals. Rabbi Heschel put it in a different way, where he said that our cathedral is a cathedral in time. It's Shabbat. Instead of space, we sanctified time. And we created a magnificent structure called Shabbat. He wrote a whole beautiful little book called The Sabbath, which is very, very worth everybody's reading. But I also want to just add that historically speaking, to make the cathedrals and to create the amazing culture of Western art that is so dear to me personally, and the music and all of that stuff, which nourishes me tremendously. To be able to create that, you had to have political power. You had to feel political and economic stability. You had to be the boss. Art gets created on behalf of rich people and on behalf of powerful people, which, you know, from a communist Marxist perspective, puts it a little bit into, you know, a dubious, you know, position. But on the other hand, then the rest of us, if we go on the free nights to the museum, you know, we can actually then be bathed in the benefits of that. But Jewish art was, you know, hampered and almost, you know, stifled by the fact that Jews just did not have that kind of security. You need security to create big, gigantic art. What did we end up doing? Here and there, we created like a little spice box, and we created a, you know, a Haggadah that was beautiful, or a Megillah. You know, the Purim Megillah is a, you know, a place. You know, so it wasn't in our hands. Jen.
One of my pet projects I was looking into doing is recreating in cross stitch and needlework some ancient mosaics, which I really enjoy. And I looked up like Jewish ones, and they exist, like, you know,
So, yeah.
mosaics of Moses, and like
Right.
they have some really beautiful stuff.
Right.
Like, so we must have been secure enough at various points in Rome to actually really do some lovely
Right.
things.
So thank you. That was a point that I was going to say, but then it just got lost in my verbiage. And that is, yeah, before Christianity becomes the official religion of the Roman Empire, we actually have an active, iconic tradition. We have synagogues and places of gathering, which archaeologists have discovered are full of beautiful, wonderful artwork. And in fact, to a certain degree, the amazing tradition of church art comes out of the Jewish art, because, you know, we were there first. So, you know, we did illustrate biblical themes and religious ideas and so on. And then once we started really feeling the weight of being a persecuted society, we lost that avenue. But yeah, the stuff that is still out there is gorgeous. It's wonderful. And it exists in free interplay with Roman art and with early Christian art. You know, it's like there was an open window for a while before somebody, you know, slammed it shut on us, where certain communities could feel comfortable enough to be able to all express themselves in their own way and learn from each other and appreciate what was going on with each other technically and imagery wise and so on. But then it like I said, the door slammed shut on us. So yeah, Sarita.
A couple of things. So on that point, I mean, I think that, you know, as a people, we had to come up with something that was portable. I mean, and so our books, our words, but also the small pieces of art, you know, that was something that we could carry around. And it's, I think, noticeable that, you know, Israel gets started as a country, and what happens is the orchestra gets, you know, started, museum, you know, and immediately it was let's start and develop this stuff that we haven't been able to. I just wanted to sort of go back to the images in this Mishna, and I think that, you know, okay, you know, it's pretty standard to say that, you know, we're going to end up as dust, but, you know, if we think about where we come from, we could start from, you know, babyhood or something, you know, instead it's just this horrible fetid drop image. And I think it's humbling. I mean, I think that this imagery is sort of we all come from the same place. We go to the same place. And so that's very humbling. If,
Right.
no one's up here and someone else down here. We're all coming from the same place
Right.
and going
Yeah.
to the same place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right, since you steered us back into the Mishnah and the text of the Mishnah itself, so let's stay there and not go off into the general theories of Jewish culture and all of that stuff. But if we look at these, there are three things, right? Three things to look
Hold
at.
on. Can I just make, Lou made a comment about the fetid drop. He said, if you look at the fetid drop under a microscope, he said, what you see is it's teeming with life. So he said, maybe that's another way to look at the fetid drop.
Well, it's not. I mean, it's not the other way to look at it. It's not the way that Akavya ben Mahalalel wants you to look at it.
Right.
Because he doesn't call it, a little tiny drop. He
Yeah.
calls it a stinking, icky drop. And of course, it is teeming with life. If it weren't teeming with life, there would be no life that would be created from it. So that's true. So that brings me to the point that I think that he's trying to say. Akavya ben Mahalalel is not amazed by the miracle of conception. He's not amazed by the fact that we start from these two little, whatever they're called, these little cells that then unite, and then there's an Akavya ben Mahalalel that comes out of this. It's like he's not celebrating that at all. He's giving these negative value judgments. This is putrid. This is awful. Now, what he's saying though is not a value judgment because he's against life, but if we look at the two out of the three things that he's talking about, what he's talking about is that material decays, that the physical reality that we live in and with falls apart. So yes, that drop as the beginning of life, can be extraordinary and somehow or other, one of the who's going to win the race, and actually be the one to unite with the egg and so on. You could get very excited and happy about that, but he's pointing out in the end, it's all going to rot. It's going to rot, and the rotting starts from the beginning. That's his point. Even though because guess what? There's one tiny little, cell. What's the technical term for those cells?
Gametes.
What?
Gametes.
And the zygote is the other side? What's a
I
zygote?
think zygote is after they combine.
After they combine. Okay, so there's one gamete that's going to make it, right? What happens to all the other gametes? Exactly, right? So, and that one gamete that makes it does not make a drop, right? So the drop is actually thousands, I don't know, what is it? How, there's zillions, let's use a technical term, zillions of these, gametes that are all destined actually to fail, to just like swim around for a while and then collapse and decompose and putrefy. So, I mean, Lou's point is very important counterpoint, but it helps us to appreciate where Akavya ben Mahalalel is going. He says, look at this part. Look at the rotten, decaying, massive reality of physical being. And that's at our beginning, and that's at our end. And then he says, but then who are you going to have to stand in front of? What do you mean, who am I going to? I'm going to be nothing. I'm going to fall apart and rot and be eaten up by the worms and maggots. And then what does Akavya ben Mahalalel say? But you're going to stand up. Who are you going to actually have to face? Well, who's the you that's facing whoever it is that we're going to face? So that's where there's this tension and this paradox, right? He's saying, if you think you are you, guess what? That part doesn't have any hope, right? It's from the beginning, programmed to the end to just rot and decompose. But then there's you, right? And you will have to give an accounting of your life before the Kadosh Baruch Hu Melech Malchei Amlachim, the most powerful, most majestic, most overwhelming being and force of reality, the Holy Blessed One. You're going to stand in front of that Holy Blessed One. So that you is not exhausted, is not defined completely by all of the, the beginning and the end. You know, there's the famous saying, right? I'm the beginning and the end. I'm the Alpha and the Omega. Our Alpha and Omega is a putrid drop and a rotting corpse. And yet, that's not who we are. We are not that Alpha and Omega. We're actually something that stands in front of God and then is held accountable. God says, "Nu, what did you do with yourself? What kind of life did you actually live?" So there's a swing from a very, 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 disgusted view of our material dimension to this unbelievable, exalted, idea that we have some kind of, for lack of a better word, a spiritual essence that is indestructible. Right? That's not going to rot. It's not going to fall apart. It's not going to stink and decay. It's going to be standing in front of God. But when it stands in front of God, it's going to be held accountable. I want to, just for comparison, look back, if you have the text in front of you, chapter 2. The first Mishna in chapter 2. So we have Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi, is the authority there. And we're talking, Akavia ben Mahalalel lives at the very beginning of the rabbinic period. Rabbi lives at the pinnacle, the culmination of creating the Mishna in the, about 200, 220 CE. Akavia ben Mahalalel is over 200 years before that. And Rabbi, we read this, so we know this by heart already. So Suri, you got it? So actually the part that
The end of it, yeah.
Yeah, the
Reflect
end of it.
upon,
but
right,
you know what?
reflect,
Read the whole thing. It's okay, because some people are going to not find it so well. So go, just read the whole thing.
Rabbi said, which is the right course that a man should choose for himself? That which is an honor to him who does it, and which also brings him honor from mankind. Be heedful of a light precept as of a grave one, for thou knowest not the grant of reward for each precept. Reckon the loss incurred by the fulfillment of a precept against the reward secured by its observance, and the gain gotten by a transgression against the loss it involves.
Okay, so
Reflect-
stop. So now, so all that, let's forget that part. I know it's hard for us to do that, but let's just ignore that part. And now, the last statement.
Reflect upon three things, and thou wilt not come within the power of sin. Know what is above thee, a seeing eye and a hearing ear, and all thy deeds written in a book.
Okay, so the introductory phrase, consider three things and you will not come into the grip of sin. That's the identical phrase, right? That's the repeat of what had been said earlier, generations before by Akavia ben Mahalalel. But what Rabbi says is not the identical, is it? So how do we compare those two statements? He's saying, you know what? Visualize, consider these other three things. What's his emphasis on?
Well, his emphasis is on the last of the things that Akavia is talking about. Thinking about, whom you're going to stand before, right? And that all through your life, you should be thinking that everything you do is being seen and heard and written down.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, so he ends up talking about a big overall idea. Know what is above you. Da malamala mincha. Know what is above you. And then he breaks it down into three things. A seeing eye, you're being watched all the time. Ozen shomat, right? Your telephone is being tapped in, every second, right? And everything that you do, right? So how you look, what you say, and everything that you do is all being accounted for. Okay, but so how do we put that next to what Akavya ben Mahalal said? Yeah, Josie. No, I can't hear a word.
Like in
Yes.
chapter 2, we're talking more about God, and in chapter 3, we're talking more about you, the person,
Right.
because Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi says he's describing God, seeing eye, hearing ear, and a book of record. That's
Right.
not us.
Or God's gazpacho squad,
Yes,
right?
that's not us.
That's watching over you, that's spying on you, and recording every single thing that you're doing. Actually, what he's saying, is in a certain sense, pretty creepy-ish. This is surveillance, right? And in the end, there's nothing that's left for you to add. You don't. There's nothing for you to say even, because already everything. We know everything you've thought, everything you've done, everything you've said, everything you've done well or not. We got it already, so you better be careful. But Akavya ben Mahalalel pictures you're going to stand in front of the Holy Blessed One, and there's a lot more of an implication that, well, what do you have to say? Give an accounting of yourself. How can you face God with God in front of you? Not so much having everything already written out, but saying, what will you explain to God? Will you be able to explain something to God? Now, the implication is that there's a more of a sense of your own stature. Literally, you're going to stand in front of God, as opposed to Rabbi's idea that if you don't get your act together during life, then you're finished, period. That's all. There's nothing going to happen after you die, except God just throwing you into the, into the plus pile or the minus pile, depending on what you've done. Right? The idea of standing before God is Akavya ben Mahalal is thinking, it's on you. You will do this. You will have to stand before God. So what's it going to be? All right, we're going to end here, and look forward to continuing to learn next time. All right.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
So,
Thank you.